my name is Celine, and in this video I'll be talking through my process of completing my first year film at CalArts. You probably want to watch the film before watching the rest of this video to avoid spoilers. You can find it right here on this channel. For context, at CalArts we're expected to make an animated film every year. In the first year, we're given a set of restrictions. The film needs to be in black and white, have no dialogue, and must be within 90 seconds. Without further ado, let's jump into the making of my film, Low Spirits. The process began way back in September of 2024. As part of one of our first assignments in our story class, we were asked to come up with 3 loglines of potential film ideas. The one I ended up picking for my list was, "An affectionate cat is willing to prevent their owner from overworking by any means necessary." I chose this one because I like cats, and I have 5 of them as of this video, and I wanted to do something simple but heartwarming. The story itself is inspired by a memory with one of my cats, Mickey, who is very affectionate and constantly begging for attention. After deciding on the story, we had another assignment to rough out the thumbnails for the entire film idea. I remember finding this part quite daunting as I didn't have much experience with storyboarding or thumbnailing at that point, and I hadn't really developed a good shorthand yet, but nevertheless I just had to jump right into it. It was around October when I put my thumbnails into a quick animatic and showed my progress and logline to my teachers, who offered helpful feedback. My story went through a lot of changes at this stage. Originally, it was about the owner working really late on an art project, and the cat noticed that the owner was really stressed, so he kept trying to get the owner to go to bed through various antics until he eventually accidentally spills water over the owner's project, so she gives up and goes to bed. Some of the feedback I received on my animatic for this story was that a lot of my shots were way too zoomed in, and things were happening really quickly. The tension between the cat and the human wasn't clear, and the ending didn't feel quite deliberate enough. So keeping those thoughts in mind, I went to work developing the story in different ways. I remember thinking to myself that the story felt too realistic, like there wasn't anything that quote-unquote justified it being told in an animated medium, so for one of my revisions, I had like an abstract-ish chase sequence thing, and I think I got a bit overexcited and tried to jump really far down the pipeline by planning to do all these ambitious things with the visuals for the story, but I ended up kind of trying to shoehorn scenes into the story that could use those styles, which just ended up making things unclear, so eventually I scrapped that idea. I struggled a lot to really lock down the story, and it felt like everything I was trying was just going nowhere. Luckily, I was talking to my roommate at one point, and I think I mentioned something about how there needed to be a better reason for why the cat was being ignored, and she suggested for the cat to be a ghost, which changed the trajectory of my film forever. So shout out to Melody, if you're watching this, thank you. From then on, the story took more of a bittersweet turn, and the logline became, "An affectionate cat tries to catch their owner's attention one last time," and I got to work thumbnailing the new story. In the meantime, I started looking for a composer, and I edited together a bunch of sound clips that fit the vibe of what I wanted for the music of my film. Shout out to my composer Marlon Rue for their amazing work and giving me a really good draft really fast. Throughout the month, I also got started working on the character designs, which is definitely not my strong suit, so I struggled a lot. For the cat's design, I looked to Meg Park and Jesus Alonso Iglesias' cat designs for reference, and did some shaped language studies of their work. Since the cat in the story was inspired by my own, all I knew for certain is that I wanted the cat to have a wide, smug grin and a confident, attention-seeking personality, since I considered those to be some of Mickey's key features. I was showing my progress to my parents, and I got this very interesting response, but yeah, I went through a handful of iterations for both the cat and the owner that continued all throughout November. Throughout November, I started finalizing the character design, with finalize in quotes because I was still making a lot of changes well into the second semester. But as part of an assignment for my character design class, I made turnaround sheets of both characters, as well as a pose sheet and expression sheet for my cat. I had a lot of design notes for how the girl and the cat had contrasting design choices, but I don't think they were all that obvious in the end, nor did it really serve the story too much. But with the character designs down, I started fleshing out my thumbnails into proper storyboards, and I also started trying to model out my character's room in Maya. Around this time, we were also given an assignment to rough animate 3 consecutive shots from our film, so I chose my last 3 shots. This was really daunting. I remember spending like half a day with just the first frame of my first shot because I was psyching myself out so hard, like, oh my god, it's really happening, the production of my film, this needs to be really good. So I drew and redrew it like a bunch of times. Once I actually started animating, I realized that I didn't like the design of the girl, so I ended up making a few changes. For the most part, she stayed the same, but I gave her features that I thought would make her more fun to draw and animate. I also switched to drawing programs halfway through the assignment, so I had to redo my rough animation, which was very time consuming. The main comment that my teacher gave on my animation was to make the girl getting up and reaching out to be more believable, as well as some anatomical fixes on the cat when it jumps. Now we're entering December. By this time, I was done with my storyboards and started editing together an animatic. We were given another assignment to start thinking about the style for our films and create 3 different style frames. I tried to do one that was kind of watercolory, one that was lineless, and one in more of my regular style. I also did a few effects explorations to explore how the cat would look like as a ghost, none of which I ended up using. Our next assignment was to create a 5-second long pipeline test, so I chose to develop the scene of my cat jumping into his owner's arms. I remember working so hard on it, and then I did something that corrupted my file and I lost a lot of my progress and I had to redo it, which really sucked. Luckily, I was able to redo and finish it on time. So here's what the pipeline test ended up looking like, along with the other 2 shots. I remember my teacher seemed pretty impressed with what I finished, mainly in my ambitiousness in doing that rotating camera, and he also liked the style of the limited frame rate. Here's also a comparison between the pipeline test shot and how it ended up looking like in the film. That brings us to winter break, where I continued trying to do Vista for the room, including possible furniture items or objects and thinking about like the layout of everything. At one point, I tried building out the room in Animal Crossing New Horizons to get some inspiration. I also got started on a value script that I didn't end up following at all. Other than that, I also animated a cat walk cycle for use in one of my shots and also to get used to drawing my character. But I also made sure to take a proper break from my film in order to come back to it with fresh eyes. That brings us to January and the 2-week-long winter session. I used this time mainly to work on my backgrounds, and for some reason I completely forgot about the concept of lighting, so they all looked really like low contrast and really gray. I got some critique from a mentor who literally saved my ass by pointing out that the lights should cast shadows, and he also suggested for the shadows to be cat-shaped. The final design of the room is very cat-themed. The same teacher really stressed the importance of picking a motif and designing everything through the lens of that motif, so I decided that mine would be cat, although thinking back on it now, maybe the motif should have been ghost instead. I also got started on my rough animation, which I did in the program TV Paint. And then the California wildfires hit at the same time that a pipe burst in the dorms, so we needed to evacuate. Luckily for me, my progress at that point was pretty good. I think I had like a quarter of my rough animation done, so it didn't affect me too much. Once we got back, I just continued with the rough animation and my backgrounds. In February, I worked mainly on my rough and cleanup animation, as well as compositing, figuring out what kind of style and process I wanted to use. I settled on using TV Paint for my rough animation and Toon Boom Harmony for cleanup and color. I got sick sometime in the middle of the month, which kind of sucked. And I remember specifically trying to get this shot down while I was sick and sleep deprived and not really liking how it looked. But James Baxter, who was visiting the campus, said that it looked nice, which was really awesome and made me feel better. I had a meeting with my animation teacher who gave me some advice on my shot choices and character acting, and he also said that the timing felt too even, so I tried to fix things in relation to his critique. There's not much else I did other than just steadily going through the production process. I would composite my scenes as I finished them on one big After Effects file, which tended to go by really quickly because I didn't do anything all that ambitious with my compositing other than adding room lights to my characters. By the beginning of March, a good chunk of my film was pretty much already completed, save for most of the shots that had moving backgrounds or shots I was considering replacing. I had been kind of putting off figuring out how to tackle them, but I finally mustered up the energy to rough them out. I feel like the process of the moving backgrounds is pretty straightforward, but here's a basic rundown on how I did it. Using the model I made of the room in Maya, I would animate the camera to match the scene and take screenshots from the camera's view while the animation played. I would then import the screenshots into TV Paint, adjusting the timing and the framing, and then I would import that into Procreate and trace over the modeled objects and color accordingly. For the shadows, I needed to individually track them through each frame, which was tedious but pretty satisfying. And once I was done, I would import the individual frames as PNGs into After Effects, and then adjust the timing of the frames there. Throughout the month, I had meetings with my composer to finalize the music with my updated timestamps. I also wanted a more quote-unquote nighttime vibe to the score that they were able to adjust really quickly. I feel like I was really overbearing and super nitpicky with my requests, but my composer was very patient with me and would hear me out and try implementing all of my requests anyway, which I'm very grateful for. I was making pretty steady progress on, like, everything other than my very first shot. I wasn't really sure how to approach it since I thought it looked kind of corny from the animatic, and I was a bit bored of the current style I was working in. And then one day, I had a vision. So I asked some friends for advice and I drafted it out. I knew that I wanted to do something more textured, kind of sudden, and a bit more hazy to kind of like add to the suspense in the beginning of whether the cat really died or if it was just his dream. I was much happier with this new version, and I was able to complete it really quickly, yay! And with that, the first draft of my film was complete. I used the rest of my time to go back and fix or redo shots that were bothering me, as well as fine-tuning small details. In April, I finalized the music with my composer, and I added sound design on my own. I pretty much just continued making adjustments to my film and compositing it bit by bit up until the deadline, making small changes like redrawing my character in a scene when the line weight was too thick, or making the blush lines on the girl a lighter value, or animating the lighting on her cheek. I was lucky enough to score a mixing session with a professional sound mixer who adjusted my music and sound design to make it sound better. We're given 2 weeks of cancelled character animation classes in the month of April to focus on our films, but since I had pretty much finished my film before that, I spent that time helping other people. And now that the film was done, it was time for the open show. For context, the open show was an event that spanned across 2 days, where everyone's films are showcased. It was really awesome, and I was surprised by the reception of my film once it screened. I didn't expect there to be much of a reaction to my film, but I was proven wrong, luckily, and people came up to me afterwards and gave me compliments or told me about how they cried. Overall, it felt like wrapping the entire experience up with a neat little bow. As for things that I think I did well, I finished early, so I think my time management was pretty good, even though the way I basically achieved that was by convincing myself that I was going to run out of time and just running off the adrenaline of that fear, which was really stressful and I wouldn't really recommend. But overall, I'm glad I stayed pretty consistent throughout the entire year with my ideas and saw it through till the end. I'm also pretty happy with how my camera angles and moving backgrounds turned out. I think working on them for so long had made me kind of jaded and unfeeling about them by the time I finished the film, but looking back at them, technically speaking, I think that they're pretty impressive. I also think that the pacing of the film was done pretty well, given that I only had 90 seconds, and for the most part, I don't think I really had to rush anything, and I was able to tell the story that I wanted to tell. One of my teachers complimented me on having pretty good timing and told me that he could tell I had fun with the camera angles and animation, which I was really happy to hear. As for things that I would have done differently, I feel like I played it pretty safe in terms of both story and style, although I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing because it ensured that I finished my film. But I definitely feel like I could have tried to stylize the backgrounds a bit more, or just spent more time in visual development in general. The character designs were kind of bland and not really specific, so I feel like I could have really challenged myself more on that front as well. I feel like it also would have been more efficient if I had just done all my backgrounds in Blender and applied some kind of like toon shader to make it look 2D. That would have saved me a lot of time with probably similar results. I feel like I also could have spent more time properly studying cat anatomy and movement, because I kind of just like guessed my way throughout the film. There are a couple of shots that I would have wanted to change, mainly of the cat swimming down towards its owner. I feel like the amount of cuts here are a little unnecessary, although I do remember when I showed it to my friends, a lot of them told me that my camera angles were really cool, which I appreciated. I think I probably also should have used the moving backgrounds a bit more sparingly in order to make the ending scene really pop, because I feel like at that point in the film, I had already done so many shots with moving backgrounds that it kind of like lost its novelty. Overall though, I'm quite happy with the film as it is. Now I have some general tips or advice for any incoming CalArts students or anyone planning to make their own film based off of my own experience. Take what I say with a grain of salt though, because what worked for me might not work for you or vice versa. I would say don't try to do too much with the first year film, if that makes sense. In story class, we're taught the structure of like a full-length feature film, but it's really difficult to do all of that in just 90 seconds, and you'll usually find that there just isn't enough time to tell a huge, great story from start to finish. And you'll run into issues with pacing, usually where like things just end up happening way too fast. But then again, I feel like this is the kind of thing that's difficult to understand without having experienced it yourself, so just go ham. Don't be afraid to go to your teachers and friends for advice. They won't bite. But at the same time, pick and choose what advice you want to follow, and which ones you think will support the story you want to tell, because if you listen to everyone's advice at once, you'll just go crazy trying to implement everything. Definitely show your work to your friends and ask them for help, especially if you know they might be, like, a bit stronger in certain aspects of the pipeline than you are. Teamwork and collaboration is a beautiful thing, and you'll all be elevating each other's work. This is definitely something that I wish I could have done more, instead of being anxious to reach out. If you're a fan of using schedules, or actually even if you aren't using a fan of schedules, get one and make sure you keep up with it. One of my teachers gave us kind of a recommended schedule to stick to at the beginning of the year, and I don't think I followed it exactly, but it was good for getting a general idea of what I should be finishing and when. I used a schedule and progress sheet made by one of my upperclassmen. It was really satisfying to be able to check off the boxes and see my percentage increase in our progress in real time. Take shortcuts whenever you can, especially if you're running out of time or patience. You'd be surprised at how much you can get away with, especially when it comes to details in your backgrounds or just minor inconsistencies. Just off the top of my head for my own film, for that final rotating shot I didn't draw in the little bookshelf or the cat bowls, but I don't think it was noticeable because the focus was on the cat and the girl. And also because I blurred the hell out of the background. That's really all I have for now. I'm just really grateful for the whole experience, since I feel like it showed me what areas of filmmaking I could improve on, as well as what I'm good at. The fact that I was able to finish a film at all has also given me confidence moving forward to complete more of them. I hope that you learned something from this video, or just enjoyed taking a look at the behind the scenes of my process. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and I'll answer to the best of my ability. Thank you for watching.